I'm Deborah Acuff, and I'm the Public Information Officer for the town of Truckee. And I'm sitting here today with the Chief of Police, Rob Leftwich. And we have some community questions that we're seeing continuously come up on our social media accounts. We'd like to address those with you today.
That'd be great.
We are currently under an order that Governor Newsom announced on March 19th. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so currently the state of California is under a stay-at-home order. And I wish I could go into great detail to exactly what that is, but it's not something that law enforcement's really that familiar with. A stay-at-home order and that terminology, it's the first time I've heard it in my career, and we're certainly not routinely dealing with that.
So is it different than the shelter-in-place order?
Yeah, it is. Shelter-in-place is something that we have used in the past, and that's more for emergency situations. So floods, fires, active shooters in neighborhoods will typically issue a shelter-in-place order and evacuation orders. That's terminology. It comes up through our emergency services all the time. But trying to give the comparison to what the stay-at-home order and the shelter-in-place order are is a little bit more convoluted.
What's your interpretation of what Governor Newsom was trying to accomplish with the stay-at-home order?
Yeah, I think he said it. In his press release, he really focused on trying to push to the community that it was behavior change. He wanted the community, through social pressure, to influence others to really stay at home, practice proper hygiene, only leave the house for essential trips. That really, I think, was the premise of what that stay-at-home order was. I don't think it was ever intended to be something that transitioned down to law enforcement or to us taking enforcement action, but yet, unfortunately, it's become that.
Why can't we shut the roadways and only allow locals into Truckee?
Yeah, I mean, on the high level, we're really talking about a constitutional issue, right? The Constitution of the United States is people have a freedom of movement and the right to travel. On a state level, that's not what Governor Newsom's order was. It was a stay-at-home order. It really wasn't meant to lock down freeways and completely restrict movement. Also, kind of on that state or that local level, I don't control the freeways. I-80, 267, 89, those are all arteries that really are controlled by California Highway Patrol or Caltrans. I don't have jurisdiction to just shut those down and start checking IDs. I think even if we take all that aside, looking at a local level, I'm not sure that that's really what we want to do as a police department. I'm not sure what some of that looks like. The first thing that comes to my mind is I don't know how we define what a local is. I've never been shown anything legally that says I'm allowed to make that determination based on where somebody is registered to vote or what their driver's license says or where they own a home. So when we really get into the nuances of what defines a local, it's not as clear cut as some might think. Then there's the complexities of the relationship between the police department and the community. If we were to make those stops, who do we ticket inside that car? Do both parents get tickets? Do the kids get the ticket? Does everybody in the car get the ticket? Just the driver? I think that when you really start thinking about the logistics and the practicality of doing that, you start to understand how complex that really is. It's not as simple as just identifying a local and allowing them to have essential travel, but stopping everybody coming into an area that really has a large influx of people year round.
In light of everything you just said, what would it look like if we started doing enforcement on those who have come for the weekend or people who are suspected of not socially distancing for following the stay at home?
Yeah, that's complex too. And so in our world, we use a legal term. It's called a consensual encounter. And that's when we don't have a legal reason to stop somebody, like a traffic violation or they've committed a crime or we suspect that they've committed a crime. So we do these consensual contacts, which is basically just an officer stopping their car and starting a conversation with somebody. And just for a sec, I want us to kind of envision what that would look like. So you're walking with a group of friends or let's say family members, so you're practicing appropriate social distancing. And you're walking with your family members on the street. For whatever reason, a police officer stops near you, gets out of his car. You recognize it, his brake lights go on, that he's getting out of the car. And he comes up and introduces himself, says, "How are you doing? Hey, I just want to check, do you guys live here?" "Oh yeah, we live down the street." "Oh, do you mind if I see your ID?" That's a consensual contact. That sounds pretty benign, but that could be highly offensive. I mean, if people are in their neighborhood or they're affiliated with their second home or even a home that they've been staying in since this started, having a police officer contact them and ask for their identification and start that process of trying to validate who they are and why they're there, that could really cause a lot of issues. And I've talked a little bit about the relationship dynamic. My entire career has been spent trying to get rid of some of the perceptions of law enforcement in the community, and the fact that we're robotic, or that we're these government entities that aren't people, and we don't have families, and we don't understand people's freedoms and how intimidating it is to deal with us. And I fear that the expectation of us doing those kind of consensual contacts or those enforcement stops would set us back decades. And I'm just not sure that that's the best practice moving forward.
What defines us, Truckee, as a hotspot?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I know that that term is starting to float around more in the community and on social media, coming from some news stories. I don't know of anything that actually defines mathematically or statistically a hotspot. So I'm a little concerned that our community is marrying themselves to that description of what's going on. Certainly we have COVID positive cases here per capita that are concerning, but that's from a modeling perspective. And I think what the hospital and public health and really all public safety entities are trying to do is to model what could happen. That's very different than actually looking at the numbers we have in context to what our population is. And I don't know if hotspot necessarily describes where we are, but I think there's adequate concern for us to practice all the principles that we've laid out because of where we could be. So the problem with the hotspot terminology, it's very subjective, and I don't think it necessarily captures what's happening right now.
We've also heard many complaints that we see an influx of people coming into the town. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I definitely think there's people traveling to the area. I'm not going to deny that. I live in Truckee. I see it in my neighborhood. It's very frustrating. It's frustrating for everybody, particularly those that are coming up on the weekends and then returning to wherever they live. So I definitely think that's happening region-wide. When I look at news stories and I look at what's happening in the United States, this is a dynamic, and I can't speak to all of the United States, but at least in California, it's playing out all over. It's not just mountain towns, it's beach communities, it's resort and tourist destinations that are feeling that influx. So I think that the issue there, what we have to stay focused on is it's people's actions, not necessarily the individual labels on the people that are coming up. And it's concerning that people are coming into our area. Specifically, how many people we have here, I don't know. I think it feels like it's more than it is. The restaurants are pretty much closed down or takeout only or dine out only. All the businesses are closed down. Obviously, ski resorts in the wintertime are closed down. So I think there's a higher congestion of people in the neighborhoods and around their homes, and that's giving the perception that the numbers are greater than what they are. But I'm not trying to give the impression that we don't have people not abiding by the stay-at-home and traveling to the area. I'm just not quite sure it's as catastrophic as maybe some people feel within their individual neighborhoods.
I know the actual positive test results come from the county public health and from Tahoe Forest Health System, or TFH. Why are we seeing those numbers be different?
Yeah, I see that asked a lot on social media too, and unfortunately I also see the comments that there's some kind of mistrust, or we're not communicating, or we don't understand what's going on. That's hardly the case. What is occurring is that Tahoe Forest is a special district, and it's a district. It's larger than Truckee. It's larger than Nevada County. So Nevada County is reporting the numbers, eastern and western within Nevada County. The hospital district is reporting on those numbers that are associated with their district. So we have numerous special districts in the town of Truckee. The school district, hospital district, fire district, those are all different boundaries than what the town city limits are, and also what the county limits are. So that's where the difference is. If you really want accurate numbers for what's happening in Truckee, I would encourage everybody to look to the Nevada County, look at their eastern numbers, and that for the most part is what Truckee. That does include some unincorporated areas of eastern county, but for the most part, the vast majority of those numbers are in Truckee.
You've talked before about your 4 pillars. Could you explain those?
Yeah, so that goes back to some of the things we've talked about with people being able to focus on what they can control. I really think that's a pivotal point for our community to stay focused on the things that they can influence their family and friends to do. And that's that no leisure travel or recreational travel, right? Limit that as much as possible, if not altogether. It's leisure and recreational activities, particularly those that are high risk. What's high risk? Backcountry skiing, snowmobiling, motorcycle riding, even for kids. trying to prevent them from riding skateboards and bikes. Anything that'll land you in the hospital is kind of in that zone of high risk adventure based activity. We want to be really, really conservative about that. The other is hygiene, right? It's washing your hands and washing your hands a lot. There's a new trend. CDC's releasing information. We see masks starting to come on to the scene, surgical masks. I don't know where that's going to go, and I'm not a healthcare professional, but those are really part of that hygiene habits that I'm talking about. And then the fourth is personal responsibility, and that gets into kind of that span of control and span of influence. It's really important that everybody focuses on what they're doing to keep themselves healthy and safe, and what their friends and family can do to keep themselves healthy and safe. I see a lot of emotional capital, or what I'm calling emotional capital, being spent on trying to get to the answers of who's coming up to stay, as we've talked about, and what other people are doing with their social distancing. And all that, I understand the connection. We feel that that's putting us at greater risk, people's irresponsibility or their lack of personal responsibility, but you can't control that. You're never going to be able to control everybody else. We're a law enforcement agency, and I can't control everybody. We have to focus on what we can do for ourselves, our family, and our friends.
If you had one thing to tell our community, what would that be?
Yeah, I've used this term before, and for me, it's staying focused. I've talked a little bit about span of control, span of influence, and I don't want to just make these little kitsch phrases that don't really mean anything. When I say stay focused, it's focusing on those pillars and not getting into the social dynamics of worrying about who the people are down the street that you didn't see there last week. I think that takes away a lot of emotional capital that should be spent on making sure that you're abiding by those four pillars that we talked about, that your friends are, your families are, that your kids are doing the right thing while they're home and homeschooling and distance learning. That's where your emotions and your energy should be spent. And that's what I mean by that sphere, that span of influence. That span of control gets out of that and starts to eat away at that emotional capital. And that worries me for our community, because I do think that right now we're in a pivotal time. Although the numbers are trending in the right direction, and that's really a message that public health and Tahoe Forest need to deliver to the community. I don't want to get into the specifics, but from what I'm seeing, they're trending in the right direction. The analogy I've used with people is like running a marathon. At the moment, we feel good. We've got a really good pace going, but we're at mile 15, and there's still a lot more to go. And so we need to kind of look farther beyond just how we feel at the moment and how we keep that pace going for the long haul. And that's that influence and control dynamic.
Well, thank you for taking the time to sit down with me today. I think we've answered most of the community's concerns. As this develops, would you mind sitting down with me again?
No, I think it's really valuable. I appreciate being able to address these community concerns and questions that keep coming up. Of course, we'll do that. I encourage everybody, if they have questions about COVID-19 and the numbers that are actually happening in Eastern County, you got to visit the County of Nevada website, and you'll see their dashboard that tracks that on a daily basis. There's a ton of information online about those four pillars I talked about. They articulate them differently. The four pillars is just kind of my thing, but certainly we're all saying the same thing, and I just really want our community to stay focused and driving towards staying healthy and emotionally healthy. Thanks.